What is up, guys? So for this video I want to further discuss and analyze the final scene of the third episode of season 4 of Better Call Saul, entitled Something Beautiful, in regards to Jimmy's reaction upon reading the contents of Chuck's letter. Okay, so the conclusion of the third episode of season 4 of Better Call Saul presented us with one of the most thought-provoking moments of the series so far during the scene where Jimmy read the letter that Chuck left to him following his death. That being said, in my opinion, what truly made this scene so compelling was the fact that following Jimmy reading this letter out loud, which on the surface appeared to be a heartfelt endeavor by Chuck, we saw that Jimmy did not appear to be emotionally moved by this letter whatsoever, and if anything, he appeared to react rather dismissively towards it, which as we all know from this scene, was the exact opposite reaction that was displayed by the usually steadfast and stoic Kim, who proceeded to break down in tears upon hearing Jimmy read this letter. So with this being said, before discussing the reaction of Jimmy to reading this letter in this scene as well as the reaction of Kim, I first want to discuss the theory that has emerged following this scene, which questions the validity of this letter being written by Chuck, which likely stems from the fact that the last meeting between Jimmy and Chuck in the season 3 finale of Better Call Saul, in the episode entitled Lantern, culminated with Chuck stating to Jimmy that he never really mattered all that much to him. That being said, due to the fact that this scene between Jimmy and Chuck seems to directly contrast with the contents of this letter, this as a result has led some fans to interpret that this letter is a forgery and was actually written by Howard or possibly even by Kim. However, with this premise in mind, in my opinion, I believe that while these scenarios are both theoretically possible, I nonetheless think that the context of this scene prevents either of these possibilities from being valid. In regards to the premise that Howard actually wrote this letter, due to the fact that Howard is the executor of Chuck's estate, I think an action of this capacity would be such an enormous breach of his fiduciary duty that it would likely expose Howard to potential disbarment if this action was ever made public. So that being the case, my read of this theory is that Howard would not risk taking on all of the consequences that would come as a result of this action by giving Jimmy this letter without the knowledge and consent of Chuck. In regards to the theory that Kim was the true author of this letter, due to the fact that Kim genuinely cares about Jimmy's well-being, I do not think she would overtly lie to him and try to manipulate him in this capacity by forging this letter. Moreover, due to the fact that Kim is right-handed, I think it would have been difficult for Kim to write this letter with a broken right arm. However, all of this notwithstanding, while at the end of the day, these explanations are of course only conjecture, and the validity of this letter is still theoretically open to an endless amount of speculation, based on all the aforementioned context about this scene, I nonetheless think that this scene was in fact meant to display that this letter was written by Chuck. So if we do in fact take this premise that Chuck wrote this letter at face value, this then brings us back to the respective actions of Jimmy and Kim following learning about the contents of this letter. That being said, in regards to the reaction of Kim, I think Kim's emotional reaction upon hearing the contents of this letter stems directly from Jimmy's lack of an emotional reaction to reading this letter as a result of her perceived change in Jimmy's personality that has been gradually occurring over the course of Better Call Saul, which Kim recognizes has now been further exacerbated following Chuck's death. However, at the same time, unbeknownst to Kim in this scene where Jimmy reads this letter from Chuck, is the fact that the aforementioned last meeting between Jimmy and Chuck took place where Chuck rejected Jimmy's olive branch, which clearly has had a big impact on Jimmy in regards to the aftermath of his brother's death. So, taking this backstory of Chuck's letter into consideration, while we cannot know for certain what Chuck's exact motivations were by leaving Jimmy this letter following their last conversation, or even when this letter was written due to the fact that it is undated, I still nonetheless think that this very complicated relationship between these two characters that has been displayed to us over the course of Better Call Saul most certainly exemplifies why this scene where Jimmy reads Chuck's letter is open to so many different possible interpretations regarding whether or not the individual grievances of Jimmy and Chuck against one another are in fact legitimate, which Kim is of course caught in the crossfire of. So with all this information regarding the backstory of Chuck's letter in this scene being taken into consideration, this finally brings us to the question of why did Jimmy react in the manner that he did upon reading the contents of Chuck's letter. While this is of course only speculation, I think Jimmy's apathetic and dismissive reaction to this letter that was given to him by Chuck is in fact another example of all the anger and resentment that Jimmy has inside him following devoting his life to pleasing someone who in the end said to his face the last time he saw him that he actually never mattered all that much to him. And that being said, I think in many ways the actions that Jimmy will eventually undertake as Saul Goodman of abusing his powers as an attorney to aid and abet drug dealers for his own financial benefit over the course of Breaking Bad is in many ways driven by his resentment towards his brother and is also in fact a direct rebellion against the man that Chuck wanted him to be, which as we all know from the plot of Breaking Bad will also lead to the collateral damage of his relationship with Kim coming to an end as well. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and also want to see additional analysis of the current 4th season of Better Call Saul, then make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos about the plot of Season 4. As always, my name is Anton Jackson. Thanks again for watching.